Hello there, welcome back to Perkins Pipes. When one of the viewers specifically asks for something from my most recent book, kind of had to bring out the pipe to go with that. This is the gorgeous handcrafted Golden Waffle principle, finding meaning in teaching pipe. You see the beautiful hand crafting here by Caleb at the Catholic Pipe Company. Just such a beautiful pipe. Had to bring this out since the request was specifically for something from my book. What is that, you ask? As always, let's get this guy lit. Let's get to talking. So on one of the videos, and pull this up here. This is a video from a while back called The Public Function of Literature. We'll link to that in the notes below. And a fellow who goes by @Justin the Poet left a comment, said, I would love to see a video surrounding chapter 18 of your book. That chapter spoke to me greater than any. First of all, thank you so much to Justin for posting that comment. Really appreciate that. As followers of this channel know, I try to respond to everybody's comment, and so I read the comments. I appreciate them so much. I haven't said this for a while, but if you'd ever like to do an episode with me via Zoom, I have an episode or aspect of the channel called Briar Side Chat. You can email me, perkinspipes@gmail.com. We'd love to sit down with you, enjoy a pipe, and a good conversation. So, Justin liked something out of this book. It's the latest one, the Golden Waffle Principle. And he liked essay number 18, which I confess I don't have them memorized, so I had to look it up myself. So, for this episode, what I'm going to do is simply read you this essay. May talk about it a little bit as well. Now, it's always a challenge when you're talking a lot, especially when you're reading. I like to keep your pipe lit, so we certainly may be going out quite a bit here. Okay, here we go. Essay 18 in the Golden Waffle Principle, titled Imagining Education. Imagine a square on a piece of paper. Now imagine stretching that square upward from the surface of the paper. You would have a cube, right? Try, if you can, to imagine expanding that cube into 4 spatial dimensions. You cannot really do it, because our brains only think in 3 spatial dimensions: length, width, height. But if you could, you would be imagining a tesseract or a hypercube. About the best we can visualize in our 3-dimensional world is an unfolded hypercube, such as we see in Salvador Dali's 1954 painting Corpus Hypercubus. In an age in which I can pull from my pocket a device that allows me both to see and hear a friend halfway around the world as we converse in real time, we may be losing our sense of amazement at imagination itself. What was, not too many years ago, the province of science fiction is now mundane science. We can certainly imagine amazing things, and we do on a regular basis, both in the design of products and in our entertainment. But then again, it's not that hard to do so. We have split the atom and walked on the moon. We have taken images of far-flung space and helped a 3,000-year-old mummy speak. Should it be surprising that we have imagined the universe of Marvel Comics onto the silver screen? To see how amazing human imagination truly is, consider some of what we imagined when we did not have technological marvels on every corner. In Book 4 of his Metamorphoses, the Roman poet Ovid told the story of Venus and Mars. It was an adulterous affair between the goddess of love and the god of war, and to get revenge, Vulcan, the husband of Venus and blacksmith of the gods, crafted a net of bronze in which to trap them. Ovid wrote that the strands of the net lumina fallera possent. They could deceive the human eye. The net was so finely woven that it would move with the slightest touch and was unlike anything that a weaver or even a spider could spin. Ovid, writing at the beginning of the 1st century AD, imagined this adulterer's trap at a time when it could not have been produced in reality. There were many excellent craftsmen of that day, to be sure, but none that could have crafted what Ovid conceived in his mind. Or take Lucian of Samosata, the 2nd century AD satirist, who wrote what some consider the first science fiction novel. True history, with its wild plot describing travel to the moon and interstellar war. Lucian died sometime around 180 AD, which is a long time before Neil Armstrong or Star Wars. Such a tale from a time when there was no electricity or telescopes is quite imaginative. And knowing the circumstances in which it was written, we likely experience a little wonder, if not jaw-dropping amazement, at the very act of Lucian's imagination. Imagination is a critical and foundational component of literacy, something I was discussing recently with a former student now preparing at a major university to become an English teacher. As our Zoom conversation wound its way through many ideas, I recalled the story of one of my homeroom students years ago as he took our statewide assessment. One part of the test asked the students to write to a prompt that said something like, "You and your class went on a trip to a dairy farm, write about what happened on that trip." This young man raised his hand, and when I went to his desk, he quietly said, "I didn't go on that trip." I replied that this was to pretend, that he should imagine what it would have been like, and to write about that. He accepted the advice, and as I walked away, I noticed the ankle bracelet that this sophomore was required to wear while on house arrest. Since he was in my homeroom, which only met once a week, I did not know him well, and I never learned all of his circumstances. But I was shaken deeply that day, and the ripples of that interaction are with me still. I did not know what had warranted his house arrest, but I did know that he lacked a skill necessary for learning: imagination. Whether that had anything to do with his legal trouble, I could not say, but it was heartbreaking to think that a high school sophomore did not recognize an imaginative assignment for what it was, or worse still, lacked the capacity to fulfill it. Imagination is at the heart of metaphor, and it is possible to see all language as metaphoric. When I look at an object sitting on my desk and tell a friend, "This is my stapler," I've made a comparison, a reference. I've uttered the 2-syllable word stapler, perhaps even written its 5 consonants and 2 vowels on a piece of paper, and have asked my friend to connect those sounds and letters with the object on my desk and think of them as the same. It is, when you think about it, an extraordinary act of imagination to think that 7 distinct shapes on a piece of paper are the same as a metal and plastic rectangular device capable of puncturing an object with a slender bit of metal and then bending that metal so that what has been punctured by it cannot readily escape from it. It takes even greater imagination to suppose that an act of exhalation and vocal cord vibration is equivalent to that metal and plastic rectangular device. If such imagination is required for the identification of a simple office item, how much do we need to understand math, or physics, or poetry? Much goes into the making of imagination, both in terms of the material by which imagination works and the working of that material into what we call imagination. In a similar way, a painting is the product of both physical elements, such as paint, brushes, and canvas, along with the training and practice and work of the painter. What then are the materials and the working that go into the formation of imagination? The answers, of course, far exceed what can be explored here, but there are some basics that can be considered. Experience, along with the realization that things can be other than they are, is one of the key elements of imagination. Once I have experienced a coffee cup and have come to understand that its shape may be varied, I can imagine a cup that will ride without spilling in my car, and so the travel mug is born. One of the best ways for me to rapidly expand my experience of the world is through reading. My grandmother used to say that she could go anywhere in a book, and she was right. Faster than in a Star Trek transporter, I can be whisked by a book to any place in the universe and at any point in history. And this is one of the reasons why reading is crucial, especially in early childhood. Marianne Wolfe, whose background is in neuroscience and psycholinguistics, has written much about this, and the point is quite simple. Children need to be read to when they are young, and need as much experience with reading as they can get once they are able to read for themselves. I will never forget when one of my students asked if I had read Seamus Heaney's new translation of Beowulf. When I said that I had not, he offered to bring it to me when his dad had finished reading it. As excited as I was to see the new Beowulf, I was more struck by the comment about his father's reading habits. Reading was clearly a part of his family's life, not only engaged in, with, and for the children, but by the adults as well, thus modeling the look of literacy for the younger members. If reading is a source of experience, one of the necessary ingredients for imagination, how is that experience needed and worked into imagination itself? When my son was little, we ran around the backyard in endless reenactments of the Trojan War. He was always the victorious Achilles, and I the doomed Hector, and there can be no doubt that the imaginative play of his youth, which included adventures with toy knights and kingdoms built with Legos, shaped the imagination that he now uses as an industrial design major. Whether it is retelling a story through a classroom play, complete with cardboard props and costumes cobbled together from the rummage sale, to drawing pictures of a favorite story in a notebook, this sort of creative and recreative work is essential for developing the skill of imagining. St. Anselm, who lived from 1033 to 1109, is famous for putting forth his ontological proof for the existence of God. In Proslogion 2, he says that God is aliquid quo maius nihil cogitari potest, that than which no greater can be conceived. He is the very limit of our imagination because he is the source of our imagination, and it certainly takes imagination on our part even to attempt to get our minds around how John described the incarnation of Christ in his gospel when he wrote that the Word was God and the Word became flesh and lived among us. Our word imagination is derived from the Latin word imago, which we find in Colossians 1:15, where Jesus is described as the imago Dei, the image of God. Just a few lines later, in verse 19, we read that all the fullness of God dwelled in him. He is the fullness of God. He is that than which nothing greater can be imagined. Imagination is necessary not only for attempting to grasp theological concepts, but for the living out of faith as well. Christians understand themselves as living in the world of already but not yet. Christ is already victorious of all things, and yet we await his return and the renewal of all things. This is why his description in Revelation 4:8 as the one who was, who is, and who is to come, while seemingly illogical, makes sense. But it does take a stretching of our imagination to get there. What does it mean, then, to live in such a reality? We are every day imagining new ways of doing just that. Much more can be and has been written about imagination, but I want to close by revisiting the idea of reading. Not only do books quickly broaden our experiences, the raw material of our imagination, but they allow us to see how others imagine. For most of human history, people have learned skills through apprenticing by seeing how others have done something. And this applies well to developing our imagination. When we see how master authors, both of fiction and nonfiction, have imagined the tale they have to tell, we see yet another way for us to imagine our own tale, a way that we can follow or that will inspire us to imagine something new yet again. Well, thank you to Justin the Poet for that, for saying that he enjoyed that essay and asking for a video on it. Man, this should probably be a two-part video, I suppose. Imagination is everywhere. You don't have to be a poet. You don't have to be a writer. Caleb at Catholic Pipe Company imagined as he designed this. Some engineers imagined the iPhone, whatever model I've got. It's old. They imagined that. Somebody imagined this hat, this shirt. When you plant the flowers in your yard, you imagine your grounds and how they will look. Imagination is so terribly, terribly important. Folks, I'd love to hear about your imagination. What do you think goes into imagination? What are the raw ingredients of imagination, do you think? How is imagination played out in your life? As Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing, or as I like to say in Latin, Parva ago ut tandem, nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.